Revenge films.
My name is Tabitha. I live together with my husband, Thomas. I'm working full-time at a company, and my husband's working full-time as well. Because we're both working full-time, if I'm being honest, I wish that we could separate the chores evenly between the two of us. However, although my husband was good at his job and earning for the family, he was extremely patriarchal and refused to lift a finger towards the chores. There were a lot of times that I would feel exhausted from this lifestyle, but I had always been a pretty tough girl. So even though I had my hands full with work and the chores, I honestly wasn't that troubled by it. More than this lifestyle, there was actually something else that was the root of my stress. And that something else would be my sister-in-law, Chelsea, and her bullying of me. My sister-in-law, Chelsea, was 2 years younger than me. She was 24 years old, and even though she did get a job once, apparently that company was no good and she quit very shortly after. Currently, Chelsea is unemployed and she's living at home with her parents. Anytime that I would go to see my in-laws, my sister-in-law would always be there at home. And anytime that she could find a moment where my husband or his parents couldn't hear us, she would bully me, saying things like, "You're a lazy little parasite to our family." Whenever I would ask her why she would say such awful things to me, my sister-in-law would reply, "Isn't it obvious? Because even though you have such a low salary, you're being spoiled by my brother's income, and you're a parasite that's living so lazy." It was always the same response. It was true that compared to my husband, my income was lower. However, I was making $35,000 a year, so it's not like it was nothing. If anything, I was definitely earning more than a normal housewife who just works a part-time job. Someday, if and when Thomas and I have kids, I was going to quit my current job. And at that time, I was considering getting a part-time job, but when I thought about how much my sister-in-law would bully me if I did that, it sent chills down my spine. She was really difficult to deal with. One day, my husband said that we were going to go to his parents' place on the weekend, so I had no choice but to go with him. When we arrived, my sister-in-law was grinning from ear to ear and waiting, and then she said, "I knew it. There she is. Even though we only wanted to see my brother, you didn't have to come along." Right after she said that, she whispered into my ear, "You're just a bored little parasite and you're in the way, so go home. You're not welcome here." As soon as she said that, I glared at my sister-in-law, but then she put on an act and said, "What? Why are you suddenly glaring at me out of nowhere? Thomas, help me." And she grabbed onto my husband's arm. Thomas immediately took her side and said,
"Hey, Tabitha, why are you so mean to my sister?"
He said that as if he was defending a helpless little girl instead of his grown adult sister. On that day, in any spare moment behind everybody else's backs, my sister-in-law annoyingly kept saying things like, "Go home, you little parasite, you're useless." And I was so fed up with it that when we got home, I decided to try to talk to my husband about it. I told him about all of the things that she had said to me until then and the horrible attitude she had with me. But to my disbelief, my husband took his sister's side and tried to defend her. His excuse was his sister had quit her previous job because she became so stressed and depressed, and that she hadn't fully recovered yet. And that's why she was living at home, because she could only rely on her family. He then told me that there's no way that he would be able to scold his poor sister in that state, and he said all of this to me with a straight look on his face. When I heard those words, I was completely stunned. No matter how depressed she may have been in the past and what her experience may have been, that doesn't mean that she can get away with anything and with being so horrible. That's when I said, "Well, in that case, I'm not going to go to your family house with you anymore, so from now on, you need to go by yourself." But when I told him that, my husband's face became twisted. He didn't seem to like it, but he reluctantly agreed. After that, since I no longer had to go to his family house with him, my stress was significantly decreased. And the fights between the two of us also decreased. I was thinking how nice it would be to continue this lifestyle, but that was when a big holiday came up. And because it was such a big family holiday, there was no way that I could get out of going to his family's house. So I had no choice but to go with my husband and show my face there. It had been about 6 months since the last time I was there, but as usual, my sister-in-law was unemployed and she was living her life at her parents' house, being spoiled by them. As soon as she saw my face, "Oh, so I guess you showed up today, even though I would have been perfectly happy if you never showed up here again." Right at that moment, my father-in-law came out of the living room and he was furious.
Hey, Chelsea, what did you just say to Tabitha? How dare you speak to her like that?
My sister-in-law had an awkward look on her face, but then immediately my husband jumped in.
Why are you getting so serious? Obviously, that was just a joke, wasn't it, Chelsea?
And he quickly tried to cover for his sister. At that moment, something clicked inside of me. I was prepared to become fully estranged from my in-laws and decided that the next time she calls me a parasite, I am going to loudly complain about it. After we went to visit the family graves, we were having lunch at their family house. And just as I expected, my sister-in-law waited for moments when we were alone together and she quietly said to me, "Even though you're a parasite, what makes you think you can eat the same things as us?" And she grinned from ear to ear. Normally, I wouldn't say anything back and quietly listen, but this time, I decided to lecture my sister-in-law with a loud voice in front of everybody. "That's enough. You need to cut it out already. Parasite? Excuse you. My annual income is $35,000. What part of that makes you think I'm a parasite?" I finally exploded, and both my in-laws and my sister-in-law looked like they didn't know how to react. When I looked over at my husband, he was turning away awkwardly and pretending like he wasn't sitting there. But then, "Why are you lying? You're only working a part-time job, and you're only earning enough to have a little allowance for yourself. My brother is paying for all of the living expenses, isn't he? I already know everything, so don't try to lie about it." She was saying things that were so far from the truth that I was shocked. And then she continued, "And yet, I can't believe you're making my brother do all of the chores around the house. You are seriously the worst. So obviously, it makes sense to call you a parasite because that's exactly what you are." My sister-in-law then turned to her parents to try to get sympathy. My mother-in-law said, "We have heard all kinds of things from Thomas, so I suppose it's understandable to be called that given your situation." And she actually agreed with Chelsea. I turned to my husband once again and I quietly asked him what this was all about. He was fumbling with his words and then said,
Well, if I told people that my wife was also working full-time, then it's obviously gonna hurt my pride because they'll think I'm not earning enough.
But when my father-in-law heard that, he was livid. He demanded that Thomas explain everything to them in truth. And my husband finally admitted that he had been lying to them all this time. When his family found out that I was working full-time at a company and that I was also doing all of the chores around the house by myself, my sister-in-law went quiet because this was definitely not part of her plan. When my father-in-law told my husband and his sister to apologize to me, my mother-in-law shockingly said, "But Tabitha should take some responsibility because she wasn't able to support her husband, right?" As soon as she said that, my father-in-law raised his voice.
You better keep your mouth shut. Now hurry up and apologize. Those are the only words I want to hear.
And then he made my husband and his sister stand up on the spot. When I saw the two of them apologize so reluctantly, it was crystal clear that they didn't have any regret over what they had said or done. That's when I chimed in. "Ma'am, you just told me that I'm taking actions that are understandable to be called a parasite, didn't you? But even if I was only working a part-time job and not earning that much money, to turn to somebody and call them a parasite to their face, I don't think anybody would ever forgive you for that." I spoke like I was already over it, and everybody went silent. When I found out that my husband had been lying to his family about me, I was so sad. It almost felt like all of my hard work until now had been in vain, and I also knew that at that moment, I could no longer live with my husband. I grabbed my purse, and on my way out, I simply said, "I can't live with you anymore. I'm leaving you." And I walked out of his family home. My husband came chasing after me.
Oh, come on. Spare me a divorce over something this small. That was my bad. I swear I'm not gonna lie anymore.
But I had already had enough. Seriously, I hate you so much that I don't even want to look at your face anymore, so don't come near me ever again." I left my husband there and jumped into the car and drove off. The next day I received a phone call from my father-in-law.
Tabitha, I'm sorry to ask this, but please just forgive him this time. After you left, I lectured all 3 of them, and they all felt really sorry about how they treated you.
But that wasn't going to change how I felt. The next day, I went to get divorce papers and immediately filled them in. As the divorce was decided, my father-in-law suggested that instead of paying a settlement fee, we wouldn't hold a separation of assets, and that I would be receiving all of the savings that we had collected as a married couple. Thanks to that, I was able to move out quickly and have a fresh start in a new apartment, so I am grateful to my father-in-law for that. 1 year after my divorce, when I walked out of my office after work one day, standing outside of the door was my ex-sister-in-law. I tried to walk past her and ignore her, but then my ex-sister-in-law came over to me and stopped me. She then said to me, "I'm truly sorry for what I said to you back then." And with tears in her eyes, she was apologizing to me. She then went on to tell me that at that time she had quit her job and was feeling a lot of stress about her future. She didn't have the courage to try to go out and find a new job, and she was really suffering. And while she was going through such a difficult time, she couldn't stand that I was just working a part-time job and having my husband fully support my life. However, apparently she recently started working part-time at a convenience store. Even though she was only working part-time, she realized that it was still hard work, and she said that she finally understood through experience that there is no job that's that easy. Even though her misunderstanding came out of lies that my ex-husband was telling her, she said that now she truly regrets making fun of any part-time job and for calling me a parasite. But this time, my ex-sister-in-law was sobbing. I wasn't so open-hearted that I was willing to forgive her immediately, but at the very least, I was able to genuinely accept her sincere apology. As for what happened to my ex-husband after that, he was also a disaster. After the divorce and I moved out, there was nobody around to take care of his chores anymore. Now, I heard that he's living in a house that's become a complete dumpster, and that he's living surrounded by trash every day. Because of that, his reputation at work severely declined, and he was taken off his path to get a promotion. Nobody wanted to go near him at work anymore, and he ended up resigning. He was trying to look for a good company to join, but no company was willing to hire him in that state, and eventually he ran out of money. Currently, I heard that he became depressed, and he's going through treatments for that. On the other hand, as for me, I was able to focus on my job more, and I got a promotion and an increased salary. My life went back into order, and so I am fully enjoying my single life, going on long-term international holidays and treating myself. Now that I was finally able to cut off all ties with my patriarchal ex-husband, I was finally free. From now on, for a while now, I think I'd like to enjoy my life alone like this, living freely and fully for myself.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.